Welcome, welcome. Welcome to Below the Belt to each and every one of you guys. Some of you have started lunch without us, and y'all can't wait. Y'all like them bad names, children. Some of you have started lunch without us, but we are grateful nonetheless for your presence here today as we are live. Good to see each and every one of you guys. We're so privileged that you guys can join the podcast today. We have some very special guests joining us. But before we introduce our guests who are joining us today, it's 27 degrees outside in Georgetown. It's been sporadic rain throughout the morning, and there's a 75% chance we're going to have some rain during the afternoon hours as well. A 75% chance. That probability decreases as the evening wears on to a 57% chance later on in the evening. But in the afternoon, it's a 75% chance, and it's 27 degrees outside. We know it's a lot. It's much, much colder. For those of you who are in the diaspora and jealous of we, that's how y'all stay y'all jealous. But guys, we have quite an interesting discussion ahead of us. And again, we are grateful for all of you who are joining us. We could not ask for more. We are so privileged. We are so privileged that you guys have chosen to join us today. And once more, again, we are very, very heartened by your presence here. You guys have joined us from one lunch break to the next. This is our eighth podcast. We see you out there, St. Romain Adams, and we see you out there, Brian Nelson. Brian says it's cold in Brooklyn, New York. Veronica Primo Rollins, we see you. Veronica's joining us from Georgia. We see Dawn Morgan as well, and Flora Thomas. Esther Blue, we see you. June Chase. Romy Leander, we see you again. Romy says it's very cold in Maryland. Guys, don't be afraid to share your photographs with us as well. How it looks outside. We'd love to see. We'd love to see that. Lauren Jones, rather, who's joining us from London. Good to see you there, Lauren and Debbie Jack and all you fantastic folks. I see Sharwin Chan joining us from North Carolina. Good to see you, Charwin Khan. Good to see you there, Christopher Leach. And I see Marilyn Kamini Van Veen joining us from sunny Florida. Well, it's similar here. It's similar here, Marilyn. I see Alana Dowding watching us all the way from Victoria, guys. Even as you come on, why don't you share the live stream for us? I see Ivor Harry is watching us all the way from the Cayman Islands, guys. We are grateful for all of you for joining the live stream today. You know, this program is solely because of you guys, because of your support, because of your tremendous support. We have joining us this afternoon the one and only former Minister of Education, Nicolette Henry, Dr. Nicolette Henry. She's also a current Member of Parliament. She's joining us for this our lunch hour. And we have the one and only entrepreneur, Odessa Primus. She is going to be joining us as well, an influencer. She's going to be joining the discussion. And the discussion today is education in crisis and the sexy situation at the Christchurch Secondary School. Education in crisis, folks. And the sexy situation at Christchurch Secondary School. Guys, what are you guys having for lunch? I ain't gonna lie to y'all. We're having some tuna here. I'm having some tuna and some potatoes and rice. Y'all know things tight. But folks, I love simple meals, and this is very simple for me. It's not gourmet, it's not the Marriott, it's not the Courtyard or any other place. I love a simple meal. So I'm having some tuna and rice here with some potatoes. Things tight. And I'm chasing that with some Gatorade. What are you guys having for lunch at your end? Good to have all of you guys joining the podcast Below the Belt. Welcome to each and every one of you, wherever you guys are joining us from. And I'm privileged again to have with us, and I want to welcome Dr. Nicolette Henry to the conversation and Odessa Primus. Ladies, a very good afternoon and welcome. Dr. Henry?
Thank you, Sherrod, and good afternoon to you and all the listeners on this podcast. I'm really pleased to be part of today's program.
And Dr. Henry, listeners from around the world, based on some of the names we are seeing here, some of the places.
But definitely to those who are listening to us far and wide across the world. Especially good afternoon to you, Dr. Cummins, and of course, your listeners.
Fantastic. And I always tell folks, there's lots to complain about when you live in a place like Guyana under these folks. But I'm not going to complain. I'm just going to keep pressing forward and surmounting the myriad challenges because we want not only to live, not only to survive, but to thrive as well. And I thank God that He's been able to help us to do that. So welcome again, ladies. And let's talk right off the bat. Let's set the foundation to what is immediate, and then we'll talk about the larger issues about the crisis in education. There are lots of videos
Mhm.
circulating on social media, and folks send me some of them about this sexy situation at the Christchurch Secondary School. And folks, I must admit, it took me a long time to open those videos to see what they contained for the purposes of edifying you guys who are going to be joining us for this podcast. Because I want to be very careful what I'm feeding my mind and what I'm feeding my spirit. It took me a very, very long time to open, and I was just as shocked as lots of you. And in this country, that they got shocked and then they get shocked. When you get shocked, it's a difficult time to recover. Shock, you're gonna come through with little therapy and so on. But when you get shocked, I was shocked by some of what I saw in those videos. And I don't know whether you ladies have had a chance to engage that kind of content as yet. And what are your initial reactions? Doc, why don't we start with you, Dr. Nicolette Henry?
Well, thanks, Sherrod, for that. As you and the listeners would know, we're certainly not heartened at all with this tape that has been making the rounds on social media. I think it's really unfortunate that that given everything that is happening, especially with learning losses and that kind of that students will find the time to post that kind of material on the, whether it be on Facebook or any other social media platform. And from what I've heard, the tape is very it leaves nothing to be explained. It's raw, as they say, when you're dealing with that type of material. And so it really would want you to ask the question as to what are the safeguards that we have in
Mm-hmm.
place
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that our students are on a particular path. And while I know that that in itself is a challenge, I believe that if we are more proactive, and when I say we, I'm speaking to those of us who are, whether we are parents, we are policymakers, we are stakeholders, we're just citizens, just want to ensure that the next generation is better prepared. We have to come up with ways of how do we mitigate or prevent
Mm-hmm.
such occurrence. And of course, there is a agency that has direct responsibility for that, and who are paid. That's their job to do that. And so the Ministry of Education definitely came up wanting in this regard. In fact, they put out um, a very, what I would say, a very scanty press release talking about investigation. This requires more than that. As I said before, it requires a certain level of proactiveness to prevent it in the first instance, and not even to have occurred.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
I, I, I would want to offer those comments at this point in time, and then I'll definitely come back into the conversation and offer some further thoughts.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dr. Henry. Odessa, your initial reactions having heard and seen some of what transpired there at Christchurch.
I don't know that my initial reaction was that of shock. I had been in the teaching system for just over 10 years before leaving, and I know that these things are relatively prevalent Perhaps not recorded as much, or maybe now because more children have cell phones in school. I'm guessing because of the pandemic too, it's allowed, because I think that that is part of, the tool that is used right now in the teaching system. What I felt though is a bit disheartened by the fact that this is an age-old situation that we have not yet invested enough time and efforts into trying to deal with, because it is beyond just making a video. It is significantly beyond that. It goes um, to challenges. It goes to pressures. It goes to self-esteem or low self-esteem issues. It goes to people perhaps just being caught up in the moment because you're young, you're not. People say, I noticed somebody made a comment saying that everybody blaming everybody except the young people, but I'm sure that we can all think of moments. It may not be of that nature. That now as an adult you realize that that was not necessarily a calculated decision,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or one of the better things to do at the time. And so I don't know that I would chastise the students, but I see it as an opportunity for the Ministry of Education to really look at implementing programs to help these children. Now, while Christchurch is the school that the video emanated from, very many schools have similar um, problems or similar things happening at their schools. And so while I'm well, it's said that there's going to be some degree of an intervention and investigation and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, whatever systems are put in place should go across the board. Because while some people might be smart enough not to record things, it by no means means that things are not happening, and that they should not be looked into, especially now with the system the way it's set up, Sherrod, because of the pandemic. You have children going into school for a particular time, because I notice people saying where the teachers were. First of all, a fifth farmer goes to school not with the intention that the teacher becomes a babysitter. And am I saying that they should be unattended and all these sorts of things? No, but I'm also saying that this could have been during a lunch period. Do we still expect our teachers to be there? Maybe they go to the staff room, whatever. Teaching is not an easy job, and sometimes you need a minute. And so I can understand somebody not being in the space with a 16-year-old or whatever, and you assume, oh, they're probably in the class just talking stupidness and laughing. We used to look forward to those things, having our moments alone where we could talk with stupidness, beat on the table, sing. I mean, there's no beating on the table and singing in this instance. In fact, the beating is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm saying is that I just believe that this is an opportunity for us to. I mean, we have seen this before countless times, and there's a big talk around the time that it happens. But then after that, it is business as usual. We forget that problems exist and we move forward. And I'm just hoping that with this situation, we're able to not just move forward, but we were able to put systems in place that will see us moving forward and acting differently and performing differently, be it in the school systems or whatever. Engage all the parties involved. It's an opportunity to engage the parents. Let us talk with them. Let us find out what is happening. Let us see what we can do. What exactly are these children exposed to? Where are they getting these things from? Of course, if people say, oh, there's this social media, there's this. Let's not assume where they get things from. Let us try to deal with the children and to see how best we can help them, not from what we assume, but based on what the children are saying.
Thank you, Odessa. On social media, you have said, and I'm going to pull in Doc here too. Odessa has said on social media early on in the course of the day that a video has surfaced with children acting like adults, and then adults took to social media to deal with the issue and acting like children. Know your role. I find both to be disturbing. What should be the posture of people, seeing content like this being circulated on social media? What is the role of the adults in situations like this, Odessa, and then Doc?
Well, of course, it is. I think the role is different dependent on who it is. As a parent, The role is a lot different in terms of it's an opportunity for you to sit down, to have talks with your children, to have discussions with your children. It's not about criticizing the children, but about using it as a teachable moment for your children, to have discussions on self-esteem and how these things affect you in the current situation in the long run, about how image is important, about how you carry yourself is important, about the way people view you based on how you carry yourself or allow people to treat with your person. And so I feel that this is an opportunity for them to have those sorts of engagement. For people who may not have children or who may not want to have children or whatever the case is, this is an opportunity for you, because I think that we should go back to it takes a village, it takes a community, and for everybody. I could, here in Sophia, for example, I talk with the youngsters around here a lot, and whether or not I had children, I would have taken the opportunity to speak with them about what has happened and about how they feel and about how perhaps they should feel. Because some people might think, oh, this girl could really whine, this one really think she really carrying on, this one ain't making no sense. They miss the whole bus.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you need to channel their thinking in a certain direction, because some people may be okay with it, not seeing it being a problem. And sometimes you have to go and point to the word that they have to call, rather than assume that they know that this is the word that they're supposed to call. And so I think that it is about us having those sorts of discussions, not as adults playing on the name of the school and the children and so on. This is not a problem that is specific to the school. I see people saying shut the school down and all these sorts of things. How did we get to that place? How does shutting the school down fix the problem? When the school is shut down, the problem disappears? No. If the children are doing schooling from home, does the problem disappear? No. What exposures do they have? Is it something that is going on? Is it that they're lashing out for some reason? I mean, sometimes the reason is not deep, but you want to ensure that you're able to, use the opportunity to have, be it shallow and deep discussions about what is happening and the implications and ramifications that these sorts of things have. People say, oh, but we used to do it when we were small. But is it a problem? Is it just going to move from a guy gyrating on a girl in her uniform? Is it going to move to them having sex? Is it going to move to teenage pregnancy? We don't know. But what we need to do is ensure that it doesn't move from there and that it goes to where it needs to be. So we're not. It shouldn't be a situation that we allow to progress, but one that we allow to regress rather, so that we can get the best out of the children and the children can get the best out of their childhood.
Yep, 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 yep. We hear you, Odessa. We hear you, Doctor Nicolette Henry. You're the specialist here. What should be the reaction of the public, or the posture of the public in such a situation?
Well, certainly, Sharon. I believe that the public, as you know, they would be a very key stakeholders to addressing issues, not only when negative things happen, but also to contribute to the positive things that happen in society, in our society. In this particular instance, I see the adults either falling in one of a few categories. One, they are adults who are family members who have children in the school system. Then there is the school system itself, which would involve the teachers. And then we come from a larger community. And then bringing all of this together would be the administrators in education, those that work at the Ministry of Education. And so their roles are quite different, but they're all invaluable to the molding of our children. And so what you would want to see in such an instance is not necessarily a knee jerk response, because this is a symptom, I believe, of a larger problem that exists in our society. And it's not a problem that came upon us overnight. As you may be aware, that a lot of the deviant behaviors that we are seeing in society would have been exacerbated as a result of COVID-19 for multiple reasons. And so this is one of the areas that the ministry has struggled with for a long time. I remember serving as Minister of Education and having to make direct intervention to address some situations at that time I found quite appalling. Um, what I think is most unfortunate is that in many instances, some of these interventions we've not kept up with for more than one reason, but among the reasons being a change in direction, policy direction, and a change in focus. I would want to suggest that the ministry pays keen attention to students' well-being, students' molding, students' safety, students' preparation for adult life.
Mm-hmm.
If we
Mm-hmm.
do not allow children to be children, then they are going to have major challenges when they enter adulthood. And so, for instance, when you speak about the welfare department of the Ministry of Education, there's a very important and significant role for such a unit, particularly during a pandemic such as this, because we are not fully aware of what is happening in some of the homes. We are not fully aware of what is happening in some of the communities.
Mm-hmm.
And sad but true, we're not even fully aware as to what is happening in some of the school settings themselves. In order to bring yourself up to speed, you have to have appropriate interventions that would allow you to be able to grasp a good understanding of what is happening. And of course, there are other stakeholders outside of the Ministry of Education that should, lend a hand. So all decks on hand, I think, in such situations will make the work more manageable. So, such as the Ministry with responsibility for human services. They have a child care and protection agency, but they also have other responsibilities that are key to human development issues. And so this is a much larger issue, as I said. It's more a symptom of what is happening in society, and one that ought to be addressed with some amount of expediency. I know the usual response is to address the particular instance, band-aid effect. That's not going to be lasting. That is not going to have the kinds of outcomes that we want to see. And so we definitely will have to take a broader look. And for what it's worth, um, the school health unit that was established when I served as Minister of Education might very well be a good point of which they can launch off in terms of responding to such an intervention. And who knows, maybe they can be other interventions that can also be considered, whether it's to twin with it, whether it's to collaborate with it, whether the, it's multiple interventions, because children really need guidance. Children really need support, and children have to
Mm-hmm.
be given that support
Mm-hmm.
and that guidance and the tools that are necessary
Yeah.
so that they can be fortified in their development and in their upbringing, so that they can become citizens that will make this world a better place as we move from generation to generation. And that can only be done given the kinds of work that we put in
Mm-hmm.
as adults. And so the roles vary based on where you see yourself, whether you're a member of the school community, whether you're a family member, whether you're a member of the broader community in which we live, or if you happen to be an administrator, a policymaker, directly related to education, you have a key role to play.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely all hands on deck in this particular instance. Um, Education definitely is the single most important investment that any country, any community can make. And so I urge the Ministry of Education to not treat lightly this particular incident, because, as I said before, it is more symptomatic of broader and deeper issues within the education sector at this point in time. Some of these issues that are well aware that they have existed for as long as the education sector itself would have existed. But of course, it is becoming more and more more and more prevalent and definitely exacerbated with the current pandemic, just based on the modality in which education itself is delivered, presents the kinds of weaknesses that can allow us to go in a direction that we don't want to go.
Doc, it seems as though we're going to be advising on a lot of policy initiatives to correct this kind of situation. I don't think there's a Guyanese listening who would disagree with anything you have said. Folks who are now joining us, you are tuned into the Below the Belt podcast with yours truly, Sherrod Duncan, and we're discussing today education in crisis and the sexy situation at the Christchurch Secondary School. For those persons who are going to be stunned by the topic, especially the latter part there, just overnight we saw quite a number of videos circulating via social media, via whether it's WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger or otherwise. Lots of videos circulating with students at Christchurch. A lot of whining and gyrating, boys kissing boys, girls on girls, lots of sexual poses and all of these manner of things. And while in and of itself some of these things are not wrong at the age of where these students are, they should be channeling their energies differently. And we're privileged this afternoon to have joining us in this discussion former Minister of Education, Dr. Nicolette Henry, and Odessa Primus, entrepreneur and influencer. And we're very, very privileged to have both women with us. Folks, it seems as though just overnight we saw a report coming out of the World Bank, and it's quite interesting what the World Bank said about education locally. Is quite stunning. And no sooner are the ink on that report has not even dry, we see these videos emanating, unfortunately, from Christchurch Secondary School, who could well do without this kind of negative attention. But here is what that report says, and you guys are going to find it quite interesting. And again, it might go back to some of the policy initiatives that might need to be taken or deepened, as Dr. Henry was arguing earlier. The name of the report coming out of the World Bank is An Uneven Recovery: The Impact of COVID-19 on Latin America and the Caribbean. An Uneven Recovery: The Impact of COVID-19 on Latin America and the Caribbean. And in this report, the World Bank has said that, or rather, the World Bank has flagged Guyana, the oil producing republic, for having one of the lowest levels of education engagement in the region. Again, the World Bank has flagged Guyana for having one of the lowest educational engagements in the region. Doc, are they right? They seem to be right based on what we're seeing happening here. The
Well,
students are
thank you.
otherwise engaged.
Well, thank you, Shara. And I don't mean to make light of this situation, because it is indeed a very worrying and troubling situation that we have here confronting us in Guyana. The World Bank report is pretty much of the same narrative that we've seen so far coming out of the UN as we as they speak to education recovery in Latin America and the Caribbean. Um, Many countries, as you know, are further ahead of the curve than Guyana is at this point in time, largely because of the policies that those countries would have implemented. Because, as you are aware, every country was pretty much affected, and they are still affected by the COVID-19. What is different is the response and the policy position taken by countries, and that determines the disparities that we will see based on what currently obtains. In the case of Guyana, unfortunately, the information and the data is showing that we've had significant learning losses. In that regard, that speaks directly to the quality of education. And then there's also a parallel worry, which has to do with dropout rates, which is a separate issue. Both of those, however, would definitely allow the gap between those that are privileged and those that don't have access to certain basic needs to increase the gap in education delivery. And I will take a minute, Sherrod, to talk about how vulnerability would be increased, particularly for marginalized population. Um,
Go right ahead,
for
Doc.
many months, students who do not have access, whether to internet or to devices, had simply no way of being reached, um, with any education, information, or material. And then there were some students who had some access, who would have been reached, but not with the quality of education and quality of engagement that they would have had prior to the pandemic. And then you would have had those that have the privilege, that can afford to have the private tutors and so forth, and their education and learning would have been least disrupted. So it depends, of course, in terms of your access to resources. And so what we saw is that many of the students who lived in very troubling circumstances throughout this country, particularly in remote areas, in vulnerable communities, in marginalized situations, they have not been able to be reached at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And many, as children as low as 13 years old and 12 years old, they've, they've just never showed up back to school. And so that should concern all of us as Chinese. If we were to listen to even the Ministry of
Hello. Oh, let's see. You can jump in if you can.
time as to how
Go right ahead,
that
Doc.
should have
Sorry.
been dealt with appropriately. Those are some of the glaring shortcomings that I can see the World Bank would be looking at, as we have all looked at, recognize that that the animal will be in a much worse state because of the policy decisions that were taken. Because there are ways to address getting information to students. Definitely, it's what you prioritize as a country. Given the resources we have available, we could have given each student a learning device. But that, of course, would have had to be a policy decision. That decision was not made for reasons best known to those who made the policy, insofar as that is concerned. And that in itself represents a significant shortcoming in the delivery of public education in particular. And so I'm not in any way surprised, and I have been following the global data to see countries that have made significant progress in terms of their recovery, and countries such as Guyana that choose to lag behind and to leave our children, particularly our most vulnerable children, behind. I'm a politician, and I have to bring in this bit. So I ask that you bear with me. I want to just go back, because sometimes you have to look back and get a good understanding of where you're coming from in order to move forward in a way that is tangible, meaningful, and significant.
Correct.
I say
Correct.
that in the background that we have implemented policies to address some of the inequities that exist in terms of allocation. And I know sometimes that people would have had a different view and a different perspective. But when we talk about the 5Bs initiative done by the David Granger administration, I don't see anything similar to that or match that meets the needs of our vulnerable children.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so when you could provide a child with the resources, the support, and the materials that are needed individually to get into the classroom, to get education, to that is something that will have consequences and the potential to reduce inequities, poverty, disparity in education over short and long term in a significant way. But you know how immature the politics is. For reasons again that we all know so well, that was not continued. But that stands out
Mm-hmm.
as a
Mm-hmm.
flagship program that would have seen us as a country make significant strides in the education sector. I have traveled the length and breadth of this country, and I meet with children under the most difficult of circumstances, and they have spoken of how well this was received, how much it made a difference in their lives, because
Mm-hmm.
it was a continuous process too. It's not a one-off. Like I can give you 20,000, I can give you 19,000, I can give you whatever. But sometimes you have to have targeted and focused intervention depending on the need on the ground. And so I continue to say that we will definitely, in the long and short term,
Mm-hmm.
see the consequences of the decisions that we have made in the last year, particularly on the education sector. I'm in no way surprised with this report. It is one of many that we will read in horror as we look to the gross mismanagement that is occurring in the education sector.
Well
Sharon, I
said.
would leave at
Well
that.
said, Doc. Well said. Odessa, this report also, in addition to talking about the fact that Guyana in the educational system has not, the engagement with children during the pandemic has been very, very low. And the sexy situation at Christchurch might be symptomatic of that. It also talks about blackouts, World Bank report. It also talked about food insecurity. So a number of things this install administration trying to grapple with, and they have this tendency of breaking down anything that reminds them of the David Granger administration, and not necessarily putting anything positive in its place. Whereas in the public sector with mass firings, we see the same thing happening now at the embassy in New York, the consulate there. They sent over a whole set of people, and now the whole place is in an uproar because nobody is there to do the functions that really and truly matter. We see, in lots of sectors, this is the experience. Look what's happening at GCOM right now. You send home a set of people, and now you're going to come back and say we can't have local government elections because we do not have a program in place to do so. Is the World Bank right? We children not being engaged by the education system? Odessa?
I think the children were not engaged significantly, period. Because just a couple of months ago you would have seen reports out about children, a large number of children being victim of abuse, be it
Mm-hmm.
sexual or otherwise, during this period. And I feel that there's definitely a need for great interventions and interactions with the children, even while they were not in the school system. That is one of the issues that I had, meaning in the school system as in the formal system that we were accustomed to. One of the issues I had was just throwing these children back into the school system just like that after having been away from the system for a year. I just felt as though there should have been, a better way of integrating these children back into schools. And as I listened to Dr. Henry, one of the things I also thought about is the fact that as a country, we are more focused on billing academics than we are holistic individuals. And, that too is something that is worrisome. In that, things like morals and all these things, they're no longer on the table as it used to be. I mean, there are some parents and teachers who still hold those highly and try to integrate it into their children as much as possible. But for the most part, in my judgment, those are things that we need to ensure that it stays alive as well. Not just billing a child who has 14 grade ones, and whose self-esteem is ungraded. It is about ensuring that we build the best human beings that we possibly can. And even in treating with this situation, as I reflect on the comments, I think it is important, whether a child is 16 or they're 10 or whatever the case is, that we bear in mind that this is a child that we are talking about. And when we start treating children and dealing with situations that involve children as though they're adults, then I
Mm-hmm.
feel as though we are adding to the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you treat a child a certain way, then automatically that child will start to act a certain way because of the way they are being treated, or the kinds of things that they're allowed to say and do, and those sorts of things. And so that is something that I think we need to be very, very conscious of. While I feel that they're old enough to be able to make wiser decisions, people can only act and do what they know. And you cannot assume that everybody will do what you think is right or perform in the way that you think is right. But it's about, us taking the opportunity to cultivate better practices among our children, be it the teachers, be it the parents, the community, the ministry, other ministries. So I'm just hoping that at some point, we can look at this thing holistically, and not about, oh, we can send home these children who were part of this video, and then what are we sending them home to?
Mm-hmm.
How does
How is that
sending them
helping? Yeah.
home change the situation? Because they might come back and do the same thing but not record it, because they know that if it surfaces that they're going to get into trouble, they will be sent home. The probably parents can probably beat them and all sorts of things. But that does not change the problem still exists. So it is about us looking at how we can cause the problem to no longer exist. How do we solve the problem,
Mm-hmm.
rather than find a way to cover down the problem to save face, so that the school don't look bad, so that the children don't look bad, so that the parents don't look bad? It's a bad situation. That is exactly what it is. But we have to see how best we can make it, so that these things don't become regular occurrences, so that other children don't feel comfortable. Because, you may look at something, and as I said earlier, what you see in that may not be what one of these youngsters see. Somebody might see, it's bedside there in the video because I could have wine better than this girl. I could have do this, you know. Not everybody is deterred by a negative situation. So it is about ensuring that everybody, all involved, children all over the place, because now people would have shown these things to their children. Some children didn't even need to be shown. They have access to social media. So they would have seen it on their own. Friends would have shown it to them
Yeah.
and all these sorts of things. So they've seen it. So they're aware. So it therefore means, with that awareness, with that we therefore need to work on all involved. This is not 5 children problem or 10 children that appeared in a video or 15. This is a problem for our children, all of them.
And the other question that I have, and I'm grateful for all the folks who are joining us across social media, like Alison Richards and Rachel Wolford, George Tanner, Carol Jacobs, and Kenneth Fraser, Stacey Braffett. All you wonderful, beautiful, fantastic folks. Thanks for joining our podcast Below the Belt with yours truly, Sherry Duncan. We're discussing this current issue of our education system in crisis and the sexy situation at Christchurch Secondary School. A lot of people saying, Christ and this church here by the secondary school. We as Guyanese, we know how to make light of these issues to get by, because there's so much you deal with on a daily basis. But I think one of the larger questions I wanna put out there is whether some of the things that are being done are effectual, whether some of the things that are being done got any deep rooted meaning, got any possibility of lasting change in the educational system. Because it seems that in some instances we just want to tick a box to say, we're doing this or we have done that. Right? But when you look at the system, the symptoms you're seeing outside of this incident happening overnight at Christchurch Secondary School, we already had some question marks over the education system. And quite recently, we saw the Ministry of Education launch what it called its Education Strategic Plan, the Education Strategic Sector Plan 2021 to 2025. And some of the pillars of this plan, if I might quote some of them, talks about improving governance and accountability in the system. What does that mean? In education, to a parent, improving performance at all levels. What does that mean? Do we improve this, as Odessa rightly said, a student might look at this and say, this girl can improve her performance in whining or something like that. Three, improving the efficiency of the system. What does that mean? Reducing inequities and controlling and the lifelong learning and employability. But is this system really working for our children and working for the children that need it the most? And that perhaps is a large percentage of those students who are still at school. And again, we cannot run away from this report from the World Bank. This is not, as we said last night in another program, this is not the World Bank of the coalition, APNU AFC. This is not the World Bank of the opposition. This is the World Bank that has the competence to make these pronouncements, because they have the specialists who are on the ground looking at the situation, monitoring and evaluating, and then they will offer their own recommendations and all of that, and the policy, and telling us that y'all children not engaged. And then we seem to have the symptoms that suggest that very thing. You know, is there are these things that the PPP install regime throwing at education working? That,
Well, thank you, Sharon. I think you certainly touch on the right point there in terms of what this plan can do, and just the way in which the whole plan, was done. Actually, this plan predated. We started working on this plan prior to 2020, the education sector plan. And in fact, when we started working on this plan while I served, it was supposed to be a 10-year plan. It's certainly amended to reflect a shorter period and all of that. Because the thinking at that time is that it would align with the sustainable development goals and also align with the Green State Development Strategy, long term, and so forth. Um, those headings are generic headings. And so any country can come up, they can come up with a document that they call a plan. What really gives life and effect is the people that have to implement the plan and their capacity to implement the plan. Um, some might say it's a well written plan, others might say it's not a well written plan. For me, that would not be the thrust of my contribution on this forum. What is more important is that you must go beyond planning. You have to move from policy to action. And so it is the action that we have to judge them by. Are we seeing the kinds of action that will result in an improvement in service delivery in that sector? And if we are not seeing that, then it is cause for concern. Because as I said, these are very generic headings. You go to most country plans, they will have similar headings. Their activities and their action will definitely vary depending on the country's policy direction and even the political will to achieve some of the targets and the objectives set out in the plan. And so I I I always say that a good indicator of future behavior will be past behavior. I I have lived through 23 years of PPP governance. I've seen what the education sector would have delivered in those 23 years, and I have seen nothing that would allow me to believe that it will be different during the next however couple years they have there, because we've already seen them take to the path that would lead to very undesirable outcomes for the students and for the people of this country. So I am in no way surprised. And I can give you data for what it's worth. When I took over as Minister of Education, I found the situation where 13% of our students were actually passing a national examination, which is a placement exam. That should jump out at anybody. That
yeah.
should not even be allowed to happen. And you would think that it's not a 1 year, 2 year. This is over a long term period,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and to see that nothing was done about it. It hurts me. It bothers me. It concerns me.
Yeah.
And so, I'm not surprised that we're going down a slippery slope again, because when Guyana was at its worst in education, it is the current minister who was then the education minister.
And you know,
So we
Doc, that's an important point you're raising there. And I love the way you phrase it. That, you know, future action or past action, put it another way, is a good indicator of future action. And Odessa, you can jump in here, because I don't want to only take Doc's word for it. Here's a report out of Kaitor News very early in this new dispensation of the installed PPP regime. This is a report out of Kaitor News in August of last year, the 28th day of August 2020. And here what Kaitor News is reporting, Dr. Henry and Odessa. Here what Kaitor News is reporting, and it begs the question whether we have the right person at the wheel based on what Dr. Henry has just said. Priya Manik Chand, I quote, Priya Manik Chand has returned to the Ministry of Education. Her previous stint there was conspicuous for its underachievement. The Minister of Education is best remembered for two incidents, one of which had nothing to do with education, but the consequence of which turned out to be a political education for her handlers. And the two incidents they're talking about is the feral blast when she went and cussed out the American ambassador at his residence, and two, this whole no child left behind policy and how Priya Manikchand engaged that policy. So it's not only for those trenchies and the other jagabats listening. This is not what Dr. Henry is saying. It's what is common knowledge out there, especially as regards the PPP's management of the education sector under Priya Manikchand. Odessa.
Um, yes, Sherrod. I I'm not a politician, eh? And my concern is always the people, and in this instance, the children. And I believe that at this juncture, our current situation really gives us the opportunity to reevaluate what it is that we're
Mm-hmm.
doing,
Excellent.
and if it is working, and how we can make it work, or if it can't work at all, and we perhaps need to come up with a new plan, because our children are suffering. And while people run around the place playing politics, playing minister, and all sorts of things, the children are suffering, and that is what bothers me. That people will see, oh, I don't want to take what Dr. Henry is saying because she's with the PNC or with APNU, or I don't want to listen to Sherrod or hear what he's saying as it relates to this matter and how best we can implement these things because of their political alliances and all these sorts of things. I do believe that we have got to come to a place of maturity, and in this instance, political maturity, because I believe that if we were able to act maturely and to put the respective stakeholders first, in this case, the children, and of course, with the children, it's going to be a ripple effect at the teachers, the parents, and so forth. To put those people first, and to ensure that we have a plan, be it somebody's idea, our own idea, or a combination of ideas, to have an effective plan be put in place. It is sad that even in this 21st century, you see a video with little boys and girls, and you hear almost nothing of the boys being involved in the video. It is the girls who were
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
this point in life that we can just still single out the girls for being wrong as though they were the only persons part of the video. As I would have said with the pad situation a couple weeks ago, I believe that this is an opportunity that should not be missed for education. And I'm really hoping that, unlike the pads incident, that this one isn't just pushed in a corner, and that it is actually dealt with in the way it should be dealt with, to ensure that that education is not just about ensuring that you know what photosynthesis is, you can construct a sentence, you can add some numbers or whatever the case is, but education is holistic, so that we can, again, like I would have mentioned, build better human beings. And that, of course, should be our focus. How do we, when we make the people better, we make the country better. And if our aim is to have a better Guyana, then a better Guyana, it just doesn't start with having oil somewhere below the ocean, or the river or the sea or the whatever. But a better Guyana starts with us, the people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we have
Well
better
said.
infrastructure
Well
and we
said.
don't have better people, then I don't know how much progress we can really count that as.
Well said. Well said. Well said. Doc, you want to jump in there in the final moments of our program? Go right ahead, Doc.
Well, thank you, Sharon. Lifelong learning is very important construct for education, and so education is much more than what happens in the classroom. We live, we learn continuously. But when it comes to in school formal education, I think we have to hold the Ministry of Education responsible and accountable for its mandate. And I trust that that these issues will be addressed very efficiently, effectively, and in the shortest possible time, because we deserve a Guyana that is that utilizes its resources to the maximum benefit, so that all of its people can benefit in a way that is most meaningful, particularly through the delivery of education for our young people who are in our classroom throughout the length and breadth of this country. I would leave you on that note. I think we have to begin to make sound investment in education. We have to begin to hold those that are in authority accountable for delivery and for performance. And we have to move beyond plans. We have to roll up our sleeves, get in the trenches, get the work done. The young people of this country is certainly dependent on us. Thank you, Sherrod. And thank you to our listeners. And thank you um, to Odessa also for her contributions. Um, I certainly enjoyed being on your program today. Thank you.
Doc, it was great having you, and we know that you've had a full schedule. Like Odessa, you guys are busy, and Doc, you've just come back from the world stage. You were at the World Green Growth Summit 2021, part of its distinguished panel of speakers. And I have to have you back another time for us to talk more about that. And you spoke there on the green economy, on education, the role of education in advancing sustainable development. And part of what you said is part of what you spoke on there was using uh, today's opportunities to take back tomorrow's education. And that's what we need now. That is what we need now. And I consistently say on the programs that I'm a part of that we as Guyanese and as parents, we got to fight for our kids. Some of us give up too early, but I understand it. The challenges. Sometimes you're a single parent going to make a decision between staying home and going hungry, or you're going out there and the children being by themselves in lots of instances. Things tight here, and we understand it is not an excuse, but it is the reality. And we need more of this discussion as we've had here on the ground level. I'm looking at some of the symptoms, but the large issues are the policy issues where we can have lasting change if the policies are sound. And Doc, I really want to thank you for your time on the program. All that you're still doing on the international stage is great to see that these folks internationally still repose the kind of confidence in you to invite you to give keynote presentations at these international forums. And Odessa, I really want to thank you as well. I know you're busy on the ground. Oh Lord, you like we used to call it, you like Mother Teresa. You're trying to help everybody. Odessa, everybody. But we hope that in doing that, but I shouldn't even hope, because I know you got things in tip top shape, because as they say in the airline industry, you got to put on your mask first before you put on other people's mask. And we got lots of work to do here, and I really want to thank both of you, Dr. Nicolette Henry and Odessa Primus, for the work you have been doing. And sometimes it's unseen work, it is unsung work, but necessary work as well. Thank you, folks, for being part of the podcast today, Below the Belt.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Carol, and thank you, Odessa. Thank you, listeners.
Fantastic.
Thank you too.
Thank you, folks. Folks, that's our time for today. That's our time for today. We are so privileged. We've had so many of you during your lunch break. Well. Now we're entering into high tea time. It's a little after the lunch break. Depends on if you come out sharp 12. Well, and we know if you're in the public sector, 12 o'clock, tools down, and you're all gone at lunch. But we're so privileged. Wherever you guys have joined us from, whether you're joining us from the moderately sunny national capital city, Georgetown, Guyana. You're joining us from somewhere in the diaspora. Sheena Hazel, Diane Griffzandi, and Kenneth Fraser, Esther Blue, and all you fantastic folks. Claire Alexis, Charmley Richmond, we see you there as well. Thanks for joining the broadcast today. Folks, remember, we encourage you guys to come on board and to partner with us. We cannot do these programs, we cannot do such interventions without you guys. At the Cash App, we got several platforms available. For those of you who are new to the broadcast, we are available on Cash App. That's it. The international app, Cash App, it's the dollar sign. As you know, that's the usual thing. The dollar sign symbol in the ring 592. That's our Cash App handle. It's a dollar sign in the ring 592. That's our Cash App handle. We are available on PayPal as well. Folks, we out here, We out here. At PayPal, the email address is inthering592@gmail.com, because this program, Below the Belt, is an affiliate of the Ring program. And so we are available to at all of those platforms and their handles. So at the PayPal platform, it's inthering592@gmail.com. We're available too at the MMG, that's the local Cash App. MMG, folks at GT&T listening in, we got working listening. MMG, we need something with a more suave. MMG, nonetheless, the number there is 627-6963. 627-6963. And folks, we ain't got no problem with Western Union. We ain't got no problem. We ain't got no problem with MoneyGram. And we've encouraged you guys we encourage you guys to come on board and to partner with us. $5 monthly. That's $1,000 for doing this. We're on every day, well, except weekends, and we're contemplating being on weekends now as well. We were on 5 days per week, every month, every week, folks, bringing you the valid, incredible information. $5 per month, 10, 15, $20 per month, and enable us to continue to do more programs like this. We told you guys we got more in store. We ain't roll out everything yet, We ain't want to give you alcoholic too much of food. So we're rolling them out piece by piece by piece. But we want to thank you guys who have been partnering with us. You guys make the difference in our program. All of you folks listening to us, all of you viewing the program, you make the difference. Thanks for joining our podcast today, Below the Belt. I'm yours truly, Sherrod Duncan. We've been discussing here education in crisis, the sexy situation at the Christchurch Secondary School with Dr. Nicolette Henry and Odessa Primus. Thanks for joining us, folks. Do stay safe. Stay safe.